Picture the scene. You've been out on the bank for hours. You've put your heart and soul into your ground bait and landed your gear right on the sweet spot. Then, finally, a bite. You strike, you reel in, and it's another tiny roach, no bigger than your thumb. Sound familiar? Now, what if I told you that your perfect aromatic mix isn't actually attracting the big fish? In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's screaming at the trophy fish to stay as far away as possible. It sounds mad, I know, but for most anglers, it's the honest truth. In this video, we're going to break down 20 common mistakes that turn your feeder into a free canteen for the small fry and a massive warning sign for a proper bream or carp. Stick around until the end and I'll show you exactly how to fix it. I promise you, it'll change the way you fish forever. But before we get into the mistakes, let's take a look under the surface and think like a fish. The small stuff, the tiddlers and the hybrids, they're always starving and they've got no fear. They're all about smash and grab. Any bit of cloud in the water or a strong scent is a dinner bell for them. They don't mind a crowd because there's thousands of them. But the big lads, the trophies, they're a different story. These are old, wise fish that have spent years dodging nets and pike. They value peace and quiet. If they see too much commotion or a cloud of tiny fish darting around, they don't see a meal, they see danger. Our job isn't to throw a noisy party for every fish in the lake. We want to open a quiet, high-end restaurant for the guests of honor. Once you understand that difference, you've found the key to the big ones. Right then, let's start with the biggest mistake I see, grinding your ground bait way too fine. Plenty of lads, especially when they're just starting out, reckon the finer and smoother the mix, the better it is. They'll spend ages milling down breadcrumbs and grain until it's practically dust, thinking they're making a grand cloud to attract the fish. And they're right. It does make a cloud, but that cloud is a total magnet for the small fry. Those tiny particles just hang there in the water, creating a massive haze that draws in every tiddler for miles. Before you know it, you've a swarm of tiny fish darting about, and your hook bait won't even get a chance to hit the bottom. Now, what does a big bream or a carp see when they swim up? They see all that chaos and frantic movement and they think, no way, it's not safe here and there's no real food anyway. The big lads are looking for something solid on the deck, not a mouthful of dust. So remember, your mix needs to have decent, visible bits that stay down on the bottom. Think of it like this. If you were starving, would you go for a thick, hearty stew with proper chunks of beef, or just a glass of tomato juice? I know which one I'd pick for me dinner. The second mistake follows right on from the first, going way too heavy on the clouding ingredients. You know the ones, milk powder, cocoa, egg powder, or those cloud and geyser additives you'll find in the tackle shops. Now, they look brilliant, don't get me wrong. The feeder hits the bottom and it kicks off this massive cloud that looks like it'd call in every fish for a mile. But we've already seen what kind of fish actually go for that. It's spot on for match fishing when you're trying to bag plenty of active, small stuff like bleak. No, if you're out for a real trophy, it's a total killer. It's like turning on loud pop music and strobe lights in a fancy restaurant. You'll attract a load of teenagers, but the serious guests will just turn tail and head elsewhere. The big lads want their food sitting quiet on the bottom. A tiny bit of haze as the mix breaks down is grand, but a thick, lingering column of dust is a massive red flag. Use that stuff sparingly, or better yet, skip it altogether if you're hunting for a proper specimen. Right, let's have a chat about scents. Mistake number 3 is going way too heavy on the sweet, candy-like smells. You know the ones. Vanilla, caramel, strawberry, tutti frutti. You walk into any tackle shop and the shelves are groaning under the weight of those sugary syrups and sprays, and sure, they do work. But the question is, work for who? They're perfect for the small stuff, the bits of roach and skimmers that'll eat just about anything. To them, a sweet scent is just a sign of easy, high-energy grub. But a big, crafty bream or a proper carp, they're suspicious of that stuff. As they get on in years, their tastes change. They start looking for something more complex, more natural, fishy, meaty, or even spicy scents. Think coriander, pepper, or garlic. That's what's going to grab the attention of a real monster. Think about it. Kids love their sweets and candy floss, but a grown-up is looking for a nice bit of steak or a fresh cup of coffee. So stop feeding the fish sweets. Try adding something a bit more serious and natural to your mix, and I'm telling you, you'll be surprised at the result. Sticking with the topic of scents, mistake number 4 is using harsh chemical attractants. This is especially true when it comes to cheap, highly concentrated liquids and sprays. Manufacturers often load these with aggressive chemicals just to get that strong, long-lasting smell that appeals to us humans. But remember, a fish's sense of smell is hundreds, even thousands of times more sensitive than our own. What might smell sweet or appetizing to you can feel like a full-on chemical assault to a fish. Imagine walking into a tiny room where someone's just emptied a whole bottle of cheap perfume. Your first instinct would be to get out and find some fresh air. That's exactly how a big, wary fish feels. An unnaturally strong scent doesn't trigger its appetite. It triggers alarm bells. It knows that nothing in the wild smells that intense, which tells the fish that something is wrong. It smells like a trap. You're much better off sticking to natural attractants, things like grain soaks, oils, worm or maggot extracts, or high-quality liquids from trusted brands used in very small amounts. Always remember the golden rule of fishing: less is more. It's much better to underdo it than to overdo it. Mistake number 5 is a mix that's just too consistent and, frankly, a bit boring. Even if you've got rid of the fine dust, having everything the same size, say just breadcrumbs and crushed maize, isn't the way to go. That kind of mix fills up the small stuff far too quickly, and they'll be off before you know it. But more importantly, it won't hold a proper fish in your swim for long. To a big fish, a uniform mush like that is just uninteresting. There's nothing for them to root through or pick out. They'll soon realize there's nothing worth staying for and head off in search of a better spread elsewhere. Your ground bait should be more like a hearty bowl of muesli than a bowl of plain porridge. You need a variety of sizes, textures, and food values in there. You want some bits dissolving fast to draw them in, while the heavier bits sit on the bottom, waiting to be found. This forces the fish to really work the area, picking out the best morsels. It keeps them in your spot for longer. They lose their caution, and that is exactly what we're looking for. Right, now for the 6th mistake, and honestly, it's probably the biggest one of the lot, having no proper food in your mix. See, breadcrumbs and fine grains are just the transport. They're only there to carry the scent and get the message out. To actually stop a big fish and keep him there, you need what we call anchors. I'm talking about the good stuff: sweet corn, boiled peas, pearl barley, pellets, or maybe some chopped up boilies. These are the chunky bits that the small fry can't just scoff in one go. That's exactly what the big lads are looking for. When a monster fish sees a spread of safe, solid food on the bottom, he'll settle right in for a feast. The little ones can peck at the crumbs all they want, but the main course stays there for the boss. If your bait is all just dust and clouds, a big fish might wander over for a sniff, but he won't find anything worth staying for, and he'll be gone in a flash. So don't be stingy. Toss in the kind of stuff you'd nearly be happy to eat yourself, and you'll see the difference. Mistake number 7 is all about how you're prepping your big grains, things like maize, peas, wheat, or barley. Now I see plenty of lads in a rush just throwing boiling water over them, or not giving them nearly enough time on the hob. What happens then is you've grains that are rock hard and useless. You toss them into the swim, the fish come over for a look, but they can't get a proper mouthful. Worse again, if they do swallow them, it'll do their guts no good at all. You're basically training the fish to steer clear of your spot because the food is rubbish. You want your grains nice and soft. If you can't squash them easily between your fingers, they aren't ready. When they're cooked right, they soak up the attractors much better too. So don't be cutting corners. Give them that extra hour on the boil or let them soak properly in the flask. Trust me, the fish will appreciate the effort, and you'll be rewarded with a lot more action on the rods. Mistake number 8, and it's one that even the most seasoned lads on the bank make, forgetting the live bait. We're all guilty of getting caught up with the latest flashy boilies, pellets and glugs, but in the process, we often overlook the most natural food a fish can find. I'm talking about maggots, casters and chopped worms. Adding these into your mix can be an absolute game changer. First of all, it's a massive feeding trigger. The scent and taste of real, live protein is something no bottle of artificial flavoring can ever truly match. Secondly, you've got the movement. Having something wriggling and crawling on the bottom creates those tiny vibrations and visual cues that a big fish simply can't ignore. It switches on their natural instincts. Sure, the small stuff loves it too, but they get full fast. A big slab of a bream or a proper carp, though, they'll stay on your spot for hours, picking through the mix for every last morsel. It might cost a bit more, but sometimes just a handful of chopped worm in the feeder is the difference between a blank day and the fish of a lifetime. Don't skimp on the very thing they're searching for every single day. Mistake number 9, your ground bait is just doing way too much. Now, we've already mentioned the cloudy stuff, but there are plenty of other ways to get your mix moving through the water, things like geysers, pop-up bits, or hemp seeds that go floating up the second your feeder breaks open. Now, that kind of action is brilliant if you're targeting roach or bleak up in the water, but if you're after the big shy lads down on the bottom, it can be a real disaster. Put yourself in the shoes of a big bream for a second. You're down there trying to have a quiet feed, and suddenly there's a whole firework display going off over your head. It creates a massive commotion, brings in all the small fry, and frankly, it just puts the bigger fish on edge. The big trophies want a bit of peace and quiet. They're looking for a proper buffet laid out neatly on the deck. If you're going for a monster, your ground bait needs to be inert. That means once it hits the bottom, it stays there. You want it breaking down slowly, letting off a nice scent, rather than exploding and sending bits flying all over the shop. Mistake number 10, and honestly, it's one that most anglers don't even think about. The wrong color ground bait. We all spend ages worrying about the smell or the ingredients, but the color can be a total deal breaker, especially in clear water, or when the fish are being extra cagey. Look at it this way. The bottom of most of our lakes and rivers is dark, usually a mix of grey, brown, or green. If you go and dump a bright yellow or red pile of feed right in the middle of that, it sticks out like a sore thumb. To a big, wary fish, that's not an easy meal. It's a warning sign. It's like a neon target screaming, "Something's not right here." Professional anglers always try to match their mix to the lake bed. They'll use dark dyes or even just a bit of local soil or clay to tone it down. When the feed blends in, the fish feel safe and they'll settle down to feed much more confidently. If you want something to stand out, save the bright colors for your hook bait, but the main dinner table itself needs to be camouflaged. Trust me, sometimes just darkening your mix is all it takes to turn a slow day into a brilliant one. Mistake number 11 is a classic, getting the mix too wet. Now you might think a drop of extra water is no big deal, but it can absolutely kill your session. If you overdo it, your ground bait turns into a sticky, heavy lump, almost like plasticine. When you're moulding a ball or packing your feeder, it might look the part, but once it hits the bottom, It's a dead loss. It just sits there like a stone, not releasing any scent or particles. The fish could be swimming right over it and they wouldn't even know it's there. At best, it'll take hours to break down, probably just as you're heading home. At worst, it'll just sit there and go sour, scaring the fish away for good. Your mix should be nice and fluffy. When you squeeze it in your hand, it should form a solid ball, but if you give it a light tap with your thumb, it should crumble right back down. That's the secret. It stays together for the cast, but the second it hits the deck, it starts working, creating that perfect carpet of bait. So always add your water bit by bit in stages and give it a good mix every time. Mistake number 12 is the flip side of the coin, ground bait that's far too dry. And let me tell you, it's just as big a disaster. If your mix is bone dry, it simply won't hold its shape. You go to make a cast and the ball might just shatter in midair. Or if you're using a feeder, the whole lot will spill out the second it hits the water, or while it's still sinking down. What happens then? Well, you're not creating a concentrated spot on the bottom. The current just grabs your bait and scatters it over a massive area. You'll end up attracting every little tiddler from all over the place, but you won't be able to pin them down in one spot. More importantly, you've no chance of keeping the big lads on a spread like that. A decent fish isn't going to go searching for tiny crumbs scattered across the floor. They want a proper plate of food, not a few scraps on a massive tablecloth. That's why getting the moisture just right is absolutely vital. The mix needs to be damp enough to reach the bottom in one piece, but loose enough to start working once it gets there. It takes a bit of practice to get the feel for it, but it's easily one of the most important skills you'll ever learn on the bank. Now, mistake number 13 is a big one, especially when you're out on the bank in the early spring or late autumn. It's all about using way too much scent when the water is freezing. There's this common myth that the colder the water, the stronger the smell needs to be to wake up the fish. But honestly, it's the dead opposite. When it's cold, a fish's metabolism slows right down. They get sluggish and way more cautious. See, scents don't travel as fast in cold water, but they stay concentrated for a lot longer. If you go overboard with the additives, it hits the fish like a chemical punch. It's unnatural, and it'll spook them right out of the swim. Think about the smell of the woods after a bit of spring rain. Just a light, fresh hint of something in the air. That's exactly how your ground bait should be. In cold water, less is definitely more. Stick to subtle, natural smells, or just leave the extra liquids out altogether. Let the natural aroma of the grains and your mix do the heavy lifting. Believe me, sometimes the best bait on a cold day is the one that you can barely even smell yourself. Mistake number 14 now is all about what's actually in your ground bait. See, a lot of the cheaper mixes are mostly just fast carbs, stuff like breadcrumbs, bran, and crushed biscuits. Now they smell grand, and they'll pull the fish in quick enough, no doubt about it. But here's the catch, they fill the fish up way too fast. The small fry just gorge themselves on those empty calories, and then they're off. But the big fellas, especially when they're looking for a bit of protein to bulk up for the winter, they'll find absolutely nothing for them in a mix like that. If you want to keep a real trophy pinned to your spot, you need to get some protein in there. I'm talking proper fish meal, krill, or even crushed pellets. That's what sends out a real dinner bell. When a big fish finds that, he knows he's onto the good stuff, and he'll stick around a lot longer. So stop thinking of your bait as just a bit of dessert. Treat it like a proper Sunday roast. Ошибка номер 15 касается тактики закорма. Многие ребята, особенно в фидерной ловле, стараются класть прикормку максимально кучно, отправляя кормушку раз за разом точно в одну точку. Если ваша цель – мелкая рыба, это работает отлично. Но когда вы охотитесь за настоящим трофеем, такая тактика может все испортить. Представьте, к вашей точке подходит крупный, осторожный лещ, и он видит перед собой неестественно аккуратную, плотную горку корма. В природе еда редко лежит такими идеальными кучками, и это может его просто спугнуть. Крупная рыба чувствует себя гораздо увереннее, когда корм разбросан на небольшой площади, имитируя естественную кормовую поляну. Поэтому при стартовом закорме не бойтесь давать небольшой разброс. Создавайте не крошечную точку, а скорее кормовое пятно или дорожку диаметром около 1,5 метров. Это позволит рыбе подойти к угощению с любой стороны, не опасаясь подвоха. А она будет спокойно перемещаться по вашему столу, и шансы на то, что она смело возьмет насадку, вырастут в разы. Mistake 16 is overlooking a dead or inert base. Look, sometimes the goal isn't to create a massive cloud of scent or attraction. You just need to get the big stuff, your corn, peas, or pellets, straight down to the deck. This is vital on a river with a heavy push, or when the place is crawling with small nuisance fish. If you mix your big particles with a lively, active ground bait, the flow will wash half of it away before it even hits the stones. All you'll do is draw in every small fish for miles. That's where a heavy, poor base comes in. The simplest and most effective trick, just use ordinary clay or soil from a molehill. By mixing your particles with this heavy filler, you're guaranteed to get your feed exactly where it needs to be. Soil doesn't have a strong smell, and it won't cloud up the water, so it doesn't grab the attention of the small fry. But when a big fish comes cruising past, it'll spot those grains and pellets sitting there clear as day. It's a tactic for the patient angler, but there is no better way to weed out the small stuff and wait for a proper fish. Mistake 17 is that old idea that your hook bait has to be a dead ringer for whatever's in your ground bait. Now, there's a bit of logic to it. The fish get used to the feed, and they're not shy about taking it. And look, it often does the job. But what happens when the swim is thick with big fish, that they're feeding away, but you're getting absolutely nothing? It's because your hook bait is just lost among hundreds of other bits. You need to do the opposite and make it stand out from the crowd. Make it a bit more tempting. You could go with a bright, contrasting colour, say a red or white bit on the hook if you're feeding yellow corn, or you could use a pop-up to keep it hovering just off the bottom. You could even give it a right good soak in a concentrated dip to sharpen the scent. That one little bit that looks different is often the very thing that'll finally tempt them to have a go. Error 18 is a classic, simple impatience. Look, ground bait isn't a magic wand. It doesn't work the second it hits the water. You've laid out a proper spread on the bottom, but you have to let it develop. First on the scene, as always, are the tiddlers. They start darting around, picking at the crumbs. All that commotion eventually catches the eye of the decent-sized fish, your average skimmers and hybrids. But a real trophy? That could take an hour, maybe even 2, to show up. He'll hang back for an age, just watching the environment. If everything stays quiet and the feed looks right, he'll finally move in. The mistake many anglers make is getting itchy feet. If they don't see a bite in the first half hour, they start messing with things, adding glugs, changing the mix, or constantly recasting. All that fussing just spooks the big, cautious fish that was likely already sitting there watching. You have to settle in. The best tactic is patience. Just sit tight and let the bait do the work for you. Mistake 19 is a classic, blindly copying pro match fishing recipes. We all watch the lads in the competitions, read their articles, and try to mix up exactly what they're using. No, we're forgetting the main thing. The match angler and the specimen hunter are playing 2 completely different games. The match lad just wants numbers. He's on the clock and every tail counts, whether it's a tiny bleak or a small roach. That's why their ground bait is so active. It's fizzing, it's dusty, and it's got a right kick of aroma. It's designed to get every fish in the area into a feeding frenzy right now. But us? We're after that one proper fish. We don't want a circus down there. We need peace, quiet, and a bit of decent, heavy feed. Using a match-style mix for trophy fishing doesn't just fail, it actually works against you. It brings in all the tiddlers we're trying to avoid in the first place. So, by all means, learn from the pros, but always adapt it to your own goal. Trophy fishing isn't a sprint, lads, it's a marathon. And finally, the big one, mistake number 20, being afraid to experiment. Look, there's no such thing as a magic recipe that'll work every single time you're out. Every lough and river is different. In one spot, the carp might be mad for strawberry, but in the next, they won't touch anything but garlic. On one stretch of water, the bream want a dark mix, but somewhere else, they're looking for something bright and bold. Fish change their minds as often as the weather. It all depends on the season, the temperature, and what they're feeding on naturally. The worst thing you can do is find one mix that works once and just stick to it for years without changing a thing. Fishing is a constant search. It's all about the trial and the error. So don't be afraid to shake things up. Throw in a strange spice, change the color, or try a different texture. Think about your results. What did they take today? Why was last week different? Keep a diary and jot down what you see. The lad who's always learning and willing to break the rules is the one who'll be landing the big ones time and again. At the end of the day, the best ground bait isn't just something you bought, it's the one you've perfected yourself through your own hard work for your own favorite spot. So what does that tell us? All this time we've been shelling out for the fanciest flavors and the most active ingredients, but were we actually scaring off the very fish we were dreaming of? You'd better believe it. We've found that the way to a real trophy isn't through bright clouds or smells that'd knock you sideways. When it comes to the big lads, more, louder, and sweeter just won't cut it. It's about being smarter, quieter, and a bit more cunning. Let's break it down. If you want your bait to be a magnet for the monsters rather than the small fry, you need to stick to a coarse mix. Keep your scents natural and subtle, and make sure your ground bait stays pinned to the bottom. Match your colors to the bed, and, above all else, have a bit of patience. Your goal is to lay out a rich, safe, and steady spread that only the biggest and wisest fish in the water will appreciate. Cheers for watching to the end. If you've picked up something useful today, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on more tips. Now, a question for you. What's the biggest mess you've ever made with your bait in the past? Or maybe you have a secret ingredient of your own for the big ones. Let us know in the comments. I'm looking forward to the bit of crack down there.